The old house in Maplewood, Ohio, had always been Eleanor Vance's refuge. Its broad, wraparound porch, the scent of aged oak in the hallway, the reliable click of the furnace, these were the constants of her 59 years, markers of a life built alongside Robert, her late husband. But since Robert's unexpected heart attack 2 years prior, the house felt less like a refuge and more like an anchor dragging her down. It wasn't the physical upkeep that exhausted her, it was the financial drain, and more acutely the deafening silence where Robert's booming laughter used to live. Eleanor was a woman of firm, quiet resilience. To cope, she had launched Ellie's Comfort Kitchen, baking specialty pies and artisanal breads from her commercial-grade kitchen. It was more than a business, it was therapy. It was a reason to keep the kitchen warm, a way to chase away the creeping chill of loneliness. But the bills were relentless. Property taxes on the large lot were staggering, and the house itself, a vintage craftsman, required constant, expensive attention. The most urgent looming threat was the roof. The estimate she'd hidden in the bottom of her knitting basket, $18,000, was a mountain she had no strength left to climb. This burden was the subtext of every family interaction, especially with her eldest child, Daniel. Daniel, 32, was a rising star in corporate finance, a man whose life was now defined by profitability and return on investment. His wife, Chloe, was the reason for this rigid new focus. This Saturday morning, in the immaculate minimalist loft they owned in downtown Cincinnati, Chloe was performing a post-mortem on Eleanor's finances, spreadsheets glowing on her massive monitor. "Look, Daniel, the math doesn't lie," she said, her voice sharp and clinical. She wore still pajamas and carried a mug of matcha, every detail of her existence curated. "Your mother's gross revenue from the bakery is pathetic. Her margins are underwater once you factor in the rising utility costs and the interest on that small business loan she took out." Daniel, scrolling through the same data on his tablet, felt a familiar knot of guilt and anxiety tighten in his stomach. He loved his mother deeply. But Chloe, with her polished logic and relentless ambition, had successfully reframed his family history as a series of poor financial choices. "She's clinging to that house, Chloe," Daniel mumbled. "It's Dad's memory."
"Sentimentality is a luxury, Daniel. She can't afford it. And frankly, neither can we, if the estate is tied up in a depreciating asset," Chloe countered, leaning over him. Her scent, expensive, modern, was a stark contrast to the comforting aroma of flour and vanilla that clung to his memories of Eleanor. "You need to be the practical one, the strong one. You need to tell her to list the property immediately. A condo solves a maintenance problem and puts a hefty chunk of cash back in her hands. It's what your father would have wanted, security." Chloe had the ability to present her own interests as pure, self-sacrificing foresight. Daniel, seeking peace in his new marriage and validated in his own successful trajectory, slowly began to believe her. He saw his mother not as a grieving woman, but as an irrational impediment to a clean financial future. The following Sunday, the family convened for their obligatory tense luncheon. Harper, 28, arrived 40 minutes late, rushing in from the airport, having flown back from his sponsored influencer trip to Miami. Harper was a walking mood board, the picture of effortless cool and detached elegance. She made a living selling the illusion of a perfect busy life. She barely registered the strained atmosphere between Daniel, Chloe, and Eleanor, or the worried energy emanating from her younger sister, Clara. Traffic was a nightmare, Harper declared, collapsing onto the sofa. Immediately grabbing a throw pillow for a quick, unfiltered but still flattering selfie for her travel dump story. "Has anyone seen my power bank? My phone is at 2%. I have a deadline." Clara, 25, was already in the kitchen, quietly helping Eleanor plate the food. Clara was the opposite of Harper. Her clothes were worn-out teaching attire, her hands usually stained with paint or chalk. She was an art teacher at a local elementary school and worked late shifts at a downtown coffee shop to cover her staggering student loan debt. She lived in a tiny, overpriced apartment miles away, but drove back often, fueled by a ferocious, protective love for her mother. "Harper, could you at least say hello to Mom?" Clara asked, frustrated by the visible air gap around her sister. Harper didn't look up. "She knows I am here." "Look, Clara, I can't get involved in the house fight. It's toxic and I'm actively trying to de-stress. I've muted the family group chat for a reason." "Mom is terrified, Harper. Daniel is relentless. Don't you care?"
Harper finally lowered her phone, her eyes flicking with annoyance. "Of course I care. But what am I supposed to do? Dump my savings into a roof? That's not fiscally smart, and I have 5-year goals. Besides, Daniel's probably right. Mom needs to downsize. It's just logic. You and Daniel can handle the logistics, Clara. You're good at that stuff." Harper's indifference was not malicious. It was simply a profound absence of concern. She had built a fortress around herself, a social media bubble where problems were filters and solutions were always outsourced. Family drama was the enemy of her brand, and she protected her emotional bandwidth with the ferocity of a CEO guarding quarterly earnings. The dinner conversation was a slow, agonizing slide into the inevitable. Chloe initiated the attack, cloaking the financial pressure in false concern. "Eleanor, darling, the humidity in this climate is terrible for the foundation," Chloe cooed, taking a minimal bite of Eleanor's award-winning pot roast. The inspector Daniel hired agreed, and truthfully, you need to think about your retirement portfolio. Daniel jumped in, armed with data. "Mom, I've done a cost-benefit analysis. We can sell the house, pay off the mortgage and the business loan, and you'll have a residual of almost $200,000 for a down payment on a luxury condo. It's the safest plan." Eleanor looked from Daniel's cold corporate eyes to Chloe's self-satisfied smirk. The food felt like ash in her mouth. "Robert and I built this life here, Daniel. Every corner of this house is him. I'm not trading my home for a high-rise view." "You're being selfish and stubborn," Daniel said, his voice rising, echoing the frustration he truly felt, not at his mother's grief, but at her refusal to adhere to his spreadsheet logic. "You're putting an impossible burden on all of us." Clara felt a furious heat rise at her chest. She wanted to scream at Daniel, to point out the hypocrisy of his self-proclaimed responsibility when he had done nothing but cause distress. But she had no ammunition. She was pouring every spare dollar into loans and rent. She had nothing tangible to offer, only her presence. Her love was a powerful, unseen current, but against Daniel's granite logic, it was useless. She excused herself, biting back tears of shame and rage. The following month was a study in escalating tension. Daniel sent weekly, increasingly aggressive emails with real estate listings. Eleanor's sleep fractured. She started making mistakes on her bakery orders, the quality slipping as her spirit wore thin. One Tuesday afternoon, just as she was preparing a huge wedding order, a make-or-break job that would cover the next 2 months of expenses, it happened. Her heavy-duty commercial stand mixer, the one Robert had bought her 20 years ago, began to smoke, then seized up with a harrowing final groan of metal. It was dead. Panic, cold and sharp, shot through her. Without that mixer, the order was impossible. Her business, her last defense against Daniel's push for a sale, was crippled. She called a repairman, but the news was fatal. Total replacement needed. A new quality industrial mixer would cost nearly $6,000. Eleanor stared at the number, feeling the roof leak into her soul. Clara, visiting that evening, found her mother staring blankly at the dead machine. "I have almost $2,000 in my emergency fund, Mom," Clara offered immediately, her heart pounding. "We can use that. Please, you can pay me back when the wedding order comes in." Eleanor hugged her tightly, the gesture simultaneously comforting and wrenching. "No, Clara, that's for when your car dies or if you lose a job. I cannot take your security. I won't." In the end, driven by pure necessity and the looming threat of Daniel, Eleanor did what she swore she never would. She drained the last of the small reserved savings account Robert had earmarked for house emergencies, the account Daniel still monitored, to buy a refurbished mixer. She felt a profound sense of failure, but the bakery had to survive. The moment the transaction cleared, Daniel received an automatic alert. He stormed over the next evening, Chloe waiting in the car, satisfied that her suspicions were confirmed. $6,000, Mom. Did you even call me?" Daniel's voice was dangerously low, vibrating with manufactured indignation. Eleanor stood her ground, exhausted but firm. "I didn't need your permission. The old mixer died. I need to run my business. It was a business expense." A business expense that came out of Daniel's dedicated savings for the house foundation. Daniel thundered, his face pale with anger. "You used the last safety net for a piece of equipment for a hobby. You prioritized your vanity project over the roof, over the financial stability of the estate." He pointed a furious finger at the new mixer. "You are proving exactly why you cannot manage this house alone. You are financially reckless and sentimental to a fault. I'm listing the house this week, Mom. I've hired an estate lawyer. You leave me no choice." Eleanor swayed, gripping the counter. The accusation of recklessness, the dismissal of her work as a vanity project, cut deeper than the threat of homelessness. He truly believed she was a foolish, untrustworthy woman. Clara, hearing the shouting, ran down the hall. Daniel brushed past her without a word, slamming the front door. Clara found her mother crumbled against the counter, shaking. She held her, cursing her lack of resources. Later, she called Harper, leaving a long, tearful message detailing the fight. Harper's reply, a breezy text received an hour later, was devastating in its simplicity. "Ugh, so annoying! Just sent Mom a link for a good estate attorney. She needs professional help, not family drama. Focus on finding a replacement for that mixer, Clara. You're good at sourcing things." It was clear. Harper saw her sister's genuine distress and her mother's crisis as a logistical problem requiring a transactional solution, an issue to be delegated. Clara felt a cold, determined resolve settle in. She had no money, but she had time and fierce loyalty. The next 3 days, she devoted every waking, non-working hour to the dusty garage. Robert, a civil engineer, had been a meticulous man. Clara was looking for anything that would give her leverage, a signed document, an old insurance policy, anything to stop the lawyer Daniel had hired. The garage smelled of old oil, cut lumber, and her father's forgotten pipe tobacco. She sifted through filing cabinets, under workbenches, through boxes labeled Tax Pre-2015. Hours later, deep in a forgotten metal walk box tucked behind a stack of old tires, she found it. It wasn't money, but something far more valuable, her father's final, meticulous plan. The box contained a series of documents related to a small, dormant holding company Robert had established years ago, RV Property Solutions, LLC. Along with the incorporation papers was a sealed envelope addressed to "My Anchor, My Queen, My Ellie." Inside was a typewritten letter dated 3 months before his death, followed by a separate bank statement. The letter read, "My dearest Ellie and my girls, if you're reading this, I am gone. I want you to understand something crucial about this house. It is the heart of our family, and it is non-negotiable. I know that Daniel, being the good, analytical man he is, will be the first one to push for a sale, driven by the logic of the market and perhaps the influence of his spouse. He fears scarcity, which is understandable, but that fear will cost him his peace. I have spent the last year secretly setting aside funds, channeling them through the dormant RV Property Solutions LLC, a company only my accountant and I knew still existed. I did this to create an untouchable reserve. Attached is the current statement. This account holds $135,000. This is specifically for the roof, the HVAC, and 5 years of property taxes. It is not an asset of the primary estate. It belongs to the LLC, and the LLC belongs to Eleanor Vance. Ellie, my love, you can keep the house, you can run your bakery. You are not a burden. You are the center of the world we built. The paperwork is legal and ironclad. Daniel will realize, too late, that he chose to believe in a narrative of failure rather than his mother's strength. Harper, well, I hope she eventually learns that likes aren't loved. Clara, my sweet girl who worries for everyone but herself, this is my gift to you. Proof that you are not helpless. Your love is the greatest security your mother has. Now go save the day. Forever, Robert. Clara dissolved into tears, not of grief, but of profound, aching validation. Her father had seen the exact dynamic that would play out. He had known Daniel would falter, and he had protected Eleanor, and by extension, Clara's heart, from the worst of it. She was not helpless. She had the truth. Clara called Daniel's office, bypassing Chloe's gatekeeping assistant by saying it was an urgent family legal matter. She drove to her corporate headquarters and met him in the cold glass lobby, handing him the entire lockbox. "Read this, Daniel. All of it, especially the letter," Clara commanded, her voice shaking, not from fear, but from righteous fury. Daniel's face, usually so composed, went slack as he read his father's last words, the financial statement attached. The carefully constructed edifice of his prudent arguments crumbled. Around him, his father had not only anticipated his actions, but had explicitly called him out for his fear and his misguided loyalty. The LLC. RV Property Solutions? I remember that name, Daniel whispered, running a trembling hand through his hair. You remember the name, but you forgot the man, Clara said, standing tall. You accused Mom of being financially reckless when Dad had set up an ironclad protection plan that you were too blinded by Chloe's spreadsheets to even look for. You chose to believe she was a liability because it was convenient for you and Chloe. The house is safe, Daniel, and it's yours that's about to crash. Daniel felt a searing hot shame that transcended finance. He looked at Clara, her exhaustion, her paint-stained nails, and the honest pain in her eyes, and realized the monstrous nature of his betrayal. He had made his grieving mother believe she was failing, all to appease a wife who valued his success over his humanity. He didn't return to the office. He drove straight to Eleanor's, the lockbox heavy on the passenger seat. Eleanor was in the living room, staring at the walls, the realtor's number taped to the phone. "Mom, stop," Daniel said, his voice raw. He placed the lockbox on the coffee table. "Don't call him, please. I brought this." He watched as Eleanor, confused, read Robert's letter. When she reached the paragraph detailing the fund, a slow, deep breath escaped her. It was the first breath of true, uncomplicated relief she had taken in 2 years. "He knew," Eleanor whispered, tears of gratitude for her dead husband streaming down her cheeks. "He knew exactly what you would do." "He did," Daniel confirmed, sinking to his knees before her, the successful finance executive stripped bare. "And I am so profoundly sorry, Mom. I lost sight of everything. I let the money convince me that you were dishonest. I should have trusted you, and I should have trusted Dad. I am ashamed of the person I became." Eleanor let him sit there for a long time. The apology was genuine, but the wound was deep. She finally placed her hand on his head, resting her fingers in his hair like she used to when he was a boy. "Apologies don't unsay the words, Daniel. You have to earn the trust back, not with money, but with time and respect for my life, my choices, and my home. The LLC keeps the house safe. Now you need to go figure out what keeps you safe, because it isn't who you're with."
Eleanor called the contractor the next day. The roof was secured, the HVAC system replaced. The house settled, physically and metaphorically. Eleanor's bakery flourished with renewed energy. Daniel left Chloe a month later. The marriage had been built on shared ambition and zero shared humanity. And without the family crisis to focus on, the structure collapsed. He started therapy, acknowledging the pressure he'd allowed, and began the long, hard process of rebuilding his relationship with his mother and Clara, focusing on presence, not money. And Harper? She remained untouchable. When she heard about the letter, she texted the group chat. "OMG, 135K. Brilliant strategy by Dad. That's great news for the equity line. See, Clara? All that stress for nothing. Crisis averted. So who's organizing the next family trip now that Mom isn't stressed? I need content." Clara typed a long, angry reply, detailing how Daniel had groveled and how Harper hadn't cared. But Eleanor gently placed a hand on her sister's shoulder. "Don't send it, sweetie," Eleanor said softly. "She isn't mean, she's just empty. She doesn't know how to fill herself with anything that matters. She chose her world, and we chose ours. We can't save her from her own silence." Eleanor looked around her fixed, secure home. The ghost of Robert had finally lifted, replaced by a deep sense of gratitude and peace. She had lost her husband, but she had gained a profound clarity about her children. She knew which ones were still worth fighting for, and which one she simply had to mourn. Clara, who had saved the house with nothing more than her loyalty, finally understood her own strength. Her love was not helpless. It was the foundation the house had been built on all along. The Vance family home was safe, but the family itself remained irrevocably divided, a clear, painful line drawn between those who prioritized wealth and appearances and those who valued the weight of love.